Hi guys, this is Lauren. I'm so excited to be doing a live stream with you. I'm going to wait just a minute so the notifications can get sent out. But here is the picture. I'm just going to kind of tape it down just a little bit so you can see what we're working on today. If you are here, give me a thumbs up or write in the comments whether I sound all right, if you can hear me, if the screen looks all right. This is my second live stream, and I am slowly figuring out all the kinks and things with it. But this is the picture we're going to be doing today. It's an ornament that's kind of hanging in a Christmas tree surrounded by lots of little twinkling lights. I wanted to go for that like soft boku effect where the lights are almost like blurred out, but you can see the light from them and you get that nice blurry contrast with the sharpness of this ornament reflecting those lights. So that is what we're going for. Let's get started kind of talking about what we are creating. So I used soft pastels for this, pastel pencils. I did a watercolor underpainting, and I have a UArt sanded paper that I did it on. I'm going to move our guide picture out of the way, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. Okay, so let's go over the supplies needed for this lesson. I have a watercolor palette. This is what we're going to do the underpainting with. The watercolor, this is just a mix of Da Vinci, Blick, and Winsor Newton Cottman colors. This is my teaching palette. Use whatever watercolor you have. Even children's grade Crayola watercolors will work just fine for this, okay? But you just want to have some colors so you can do your base underpainting. The other thing you want is a paper that can handle watercolor and has enough texture to handle the pastels. I chose to use sanded paper because I'm choosing to focus more on the pastel side of things than the watercolor side of things. UArt sanded paper can handle water fantastically, and it doesn't warp or bend too much. And so I am doing the water base layer with this and then let it dry. If you don't have sanded paper, you are totally welcome to use a cold press watercolor paper. And the cold press watercolor paper will handle the watercolor, obviously, but the texture of it will allow you to do pastels over the top. Okay. The other tools that I'm using are pastel pencils. I have a mixture of Derwent, Faber-Castell, Carbothello, or the Stabilo ones, and I have a few Gioconda pastels. I kind of went through my collection of pastel pencils and picked the colors that were going to work best for this picture. So I have some nice dark greens and light greens. I have a variety of purples and like really dark blues, and a few blacks, close to black colors, indigos. I also have some oranges and peach tones, along with reds, pinks, violets. My really dark reds lean really brown, so they're like a dark reddish brown color. I also have some pale yellows, some more orangey yellow tones, and then a white for those super bright highlights. So those are the pencils or the pastels I'm going to be using. And then blending tools, I am going to be using mostly the soft tool blending tools. If you don't have these, you can use something like a sponge and like a makeup sponge, or cotton buds work for blending pastels, or just use whatever blending tools you prefer. But I really like these. So these are the blending tools I'm going to be using. And I also have some rubber shapers. These are like a rubber or silicone tipped tool. Whoops. And these work really good for kind of smudging in your pastels without over blending or picking up too much pastel. Okay. I just realized that I didn't sharpen my pencils nearly well enough. So let me go grab my pencil sharpener and then we'll get started. Okay, I'm back. My kids had wandered off with my little hand pencil sharpener. But I wanted to go over how I transferred this image. So on my, I don't know if I shared it already, but on my Facebook and YouTube channel, or my Facebook and Instagram, I had posted my reference photo and drawing guide that I'm going to be using for this video and for this picture. And you can draw this out yourself, or you can use my drawing guide as a guide to help you break down the shapes, or you can trace. I'm not going to judge you on either option. You do whatever you need to do to be able to create and have fun creating. But for me, I don't like drawing very often directly onto my UArt paper, especially like with a pencil or something, because it grabs so much of the graphite that it smudges and makes everything kind of muddy. So I prefer transfer paper. So I drew out our ornament, some basic shapes with it onto some paper or on my tablet, and then I printed it off to the size I wanted. And then I took transfer paper, and you can see my transfer paper is pretty worn out in the middle. And I lined everything up on my paper and traced over all of my line details. And then it left the image on my paper ready to roll. Okay. But if you want to look at those and get a better view of them, you can by just checking out the links in my description box to them. Okay, but what we're going to do to get started is the watercolor. And what I want to do for this is I want to do the main background. And you can see in the reference picture in the corner that it's really, really dark down in this corner. And for the most part, it's really like a dark red violet tone. So that's what we're going to focus on and start doing at the beginning. So I'm going to take, let me scoot this over so you can see it a little bit better. I'm going to take some of our quinacridone red. That's a very pinky red. And I'm using an old paintbrush for this. I don't want to, and I'm not using a watercolor paintbrush for it. The sandpaper that I'm working on will eat my watercolor brushes alive. And they won't last very long. So I'm just using like a Golden Taklon craft brush. And I'm just mixing up my red. And I'm going to mix up some violet. Nice thing about these really stiff brushes is they really get the paint activated quickly. Okay, and the colors don't have to be perfect with this. we're just blocking them in, and then we can refine them and do a lot more of that detail work with the pastels, okay? But so I'm starting off with our violet. Since it's going to be so dark in this corner, I'm going to just do violet to start with. It has the red in it. As you know, you mix red and blue together to create your violet color. So it's already going to go well with the other red tones. And I'm just going to start blocking this in. Painting on the sanded paper is a very different experience than painting on your traditional watercolor paper. Your paints don't flow quite as much. They tend to stay where you put them. So you have to kind of force them around a little bit more. And as we work, you'll notice that some of the like glowing star, like little circles, the little boku effects are going that I paint are going to be a little bit different than the ones in the reference photo. And that's all right. The reference photo is just a guide, and then we can take a creative liberty as we go along. So we've got our nice dark violet. Now I'm going to come in with our reds and start adding those. Let's see, I'm going to add a little bit of violet up at the top as well. The nice thing about making it a little bit darker is it will help some of those brighter things, like those little glowing lights or the branch. It will help the highlights created from those stand out more because there will be a higher contrast in value. And if you hear a jingling sound, that is just my dog who thinks I should be playing with her instead of painting, which she may have a point. And it's all right if you overlap some of your drawing lines with your paint, because our pastels are opaque. So you don't have to be quite as careful with your pastel, with your underpainting or your watercolors as you would normally be. If I was doing this all with watercolor, I'd be much more slower on this and much more detailed. I found with pastels, it's easier to work on like a mid-tone. So not super, super dark, but not a pure white paper either. So by toning it or bringing it to a middle value, it allows your highlights to immediately start standing out, and it allows your shadows, any shadow areas you want to paint, it makes it easier for them to stand out as well without having to work really hard to fill in all the little white bits of your paper. By painting, all we're doing is choosing to customize this, the tone of the paper to the specific areas that we're painting or going to be working on. Instead of having it all be blue or all be like a gray tone, like if you had Canson-Mitons paper, like what we use in last week's lesson, instead of using an all like green gray color and have it be the same color all the way across, we're just customizing it to fit each individual section of the painting. So we have a base layer of the watercolor done. Now I'm going to take some of my gamboge. This is an orangey yellow color. And you don't have to use anything fancy for this because we're going to be going over it with pastels. And you don't have to use the exact same colors I'm using. Okay, I'm just kind of activating it in this corner. And I'm going to just block in some yellow in some of these circles, okay? And I might change some of the colors of these like background circles, but I'm just going to block them in with this yellow tone to start with. Okay. And I do have some tape down in a few spots on this picture just to help keep the paper from bubbling up a little bit when I am painting it with watercolor. I've noticed UArt doesn't kind of warp and bend the same way like watercolor when it's really wet, but it will bow a little bit. Like you can see it's kind of bubbling up. There's a little bit of a give. That's because the paper's wet. So I just kind of tape it down on like the middle of each piece, and then I just have the photo corners. When it dries, usually the photo corners are enough for the rest of the picture. Okay, so we have some of those circles blocked. I'm going to take some of that gold color, start working on the little cap of our ornament. So more of that orangey color. And the ring. Actually, I'm going to just end up painting the whole cap with this base yellow color. And then I'm going to take a little bit of burnt sienna and mix it with a little bit of that orange. And I'm going to block in, just doing dabbing motions. Block in just where some of those shadows will be on the cap. Okay. And then I'm going to let that dry for a minute. I'm going to take our green. I'm going to start with sap green. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just going for kind of close. We can always tweak and adjust these colors as we go along. And we can add more little pine needles to our pine branches when we start adding more pastels and tweak the final shape of this branch and the needles as we work. I'm also going to add just a little bit of green in like very organic random shapes around the top. I'm not going to be as detailed as I was with the individual pine needles that are in focus. I'm just adding some green to help me remember that I'm going to make part of that background green. Okay, then I'm going to take some of my phthalo green, which is very, very poisonous looking. I'm going to mix it with a little bit of our red to help neutralize it just a bit. Because part of the benefit of being able to do an underpainting is to help get your darks really dark. Lots of times I will use like a black ink to mark out some shadowed areas on my picture, just because it can be hard to get your pastels dark enough, especially if you are using like a student grade pastel. Doing an underpainting like this, whether it's with watercolor or inks like Dr. P.H. Barton's Bombay inks, you can help extend the life of your pastels or make them a little bit more functional. And it's something I did a lot when I first started working with pastels, and I didn't have very expensive pastels. And so none of them went really dark. I would do an underpainting and would mark out all my really dark shadows with a black ink. And then I could just tweak that color with a little bit of pastel layers over the top. But I didn't have to worry about getting things dark enough because I had already made it really dark. Okay. So there's the background started to be blocked in. Then I'm going to get some of my Payne's Gray and mix that with a little bit of violet. And I'm going to add a little bit of our cadmium red to it just to help tone it. I'm going to pick up the cadmium red that had spilled on my palette. So we have this dark reddish black color. And I'm going to use that to block in the really dark shadows right here. I don't want it to be diluted too much, or it can lift up those earlier layers we did. So I want it to be a little bit more concentrated in color and not as much water. But I do need my consistency to be wet enough and enough of it that it will spread throughout my whole picture. Okay, so now we've started to get it a lot darker. And then we'll just add some more of our reds and violets to this background. So this is just the rough underpainting. Again, we're not being too fussy with this. Everything's going to get smoothed out when we do the pastel over the top. But this underpainting is going to do a lot of the work for us and make the pastel work go really quickly, because everything's going to be toned and close to what it needs to be in the finished product. There we go. Get some more of our red paint and our violet. Let's see. And then I'm going to add some of this really dark violet color from the top again and help that meet in the middle section. Okay, and our red. Whenever I paint with like a tack-on brush after using watercolor brushes, I almost get irritated by how little water or moisture the brush will hold, because I have to dip back and forth so much. Because watercolor brushes are designed to hold a lot of water, and it allows your brush to hold more water and more paint for longer. Okay, I think that will work for our base background. Now I'm going to block in a little bit of our ornaments. So I'm going to add the yellow where I want some highlights and reflections to be. I'm going to take our cadmium red and start filling in our ornament. I'm going to keep this pretty vibrant in the ornament because I want the ornament to be the most vibrant object in our picture and let everything kind of fall back visually. And feel free to ask any questions in the chat or in the comments if you're watching it on the replay. And I'll do my best to answer them for you. Okay, so we have our ornament. It's a pretty bright red. Then I'm going to take some of our violet and use it to just block in some of these darker shapes that we see reflected in the ornament. This is where having your reference photo can be really helpful because the ornament, the way it curves the shapes and the way the light and everything reflect off of it, it creates a lot of abstract shapes. So don't focus on what it is actually reflecting. Focus more on what the shape is going to be and make your markings fit according to that. Okay. And I missed a spot over here, so I'm going to add some of that violet. And then I'm going to peel off the tape since we're pretty much done with the watercolor now. And just add the paint to those sections. So make it nice and dark on this bottom part. Block this in with some red. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to adjust and tweak these colors with our pastels, okay? We're just trying to keep weird halo effects from developing in spots that we don't want them to be. Okay, a little bit over here. Let's see. I'll add, even though this isn't the exact color we want for these areas, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow in some of these weird highlight spots. And along the little wire that holds the ornament onto the tree. Okay. And then I am going to put my paint to the side. Because we are done with this part. And I am going to mute the video while I dry it. This is an embossing heat gun or heat tool. This is really helpful in drying something quickly. And it helps speed up the process. So I'm going to mute the mic for just a minute so you don't have to hear the obnoxious sound it creates. And then I will be back. Okay. Let's see. Hopefully that will give you a little bit better view of the pencils that I'm going to do for the next part. So I'm going to start on the background. I like to work from the back forward when I am painting. I find that just helps everything layer up nicely and you don't get as much halo effects. So I'm going to start kind of in this corner and just kind of work my way out. Since I'm left-handed, I typically work from like right to left, so I don't get as much hand drag. So I'm going to find some of my dark purples. It looks like I need to sharpen those quickly. I'm going to start with the dark indigo color. So this is a dark blue. And I'm just going to do some circle motions to start blocking in the shadows. Then this is the Derwent Dioxazine Purple. Hopefully I said that close to being close to what it's pronounced. And just blocking some of that in. Then let's see. This color is called Burnt Carmine. So it's a dark reddish brown. And I don't have to be too careful with how I'm laying this down because I'm going to blend it out with my blending tools. If you were working with colored pencil, you would have to be a little bit more cautious with how you lay down your colors. Let's see. Now we've got a lighter red-brown color. And what I want is I want this to read as red. So that's why I'm warming it up. It has a little bit more of that reddish brown tone, but I don't want it to have the vibrancy or the color chroma, whatever you want to call it, as this ornament. Those highlights in the ornament are going to be the most vibrant spots on this picture. And that's going to help that ornament stand out from the background. Okay. Let's see. The burnt carmine again. And I'm not putting on a super thick layer. I'm just blocking this in. Let's see. I'm going to take a little bit of this pinky red color. And I'm going to put a little bit of that in the center parts. When it's blended with the other colors, it will be dulled down and neutralized just a little bit. And we're just going to add just a tiny hint of that. Okay. We'll start off with that, and then we'll add our green blurred out areas as well. So let's see. We'll use this one. I'm going to start out with these slightly lighter colors. And I'm going to overlap it because this is going to have a whole bunch of like circle effects. And one thing to keep in mind, if you're using something like a soft tool to blend out pastel pencils, it will thin it out so it won't be quite as opaque. Sorry if you just heard a loud dog shaking, stretching up and waking up from their nap. So just blending this out. Then I'm going to start in this dark corner and blend out from there as well. I do like at the beginning of a project how the soft tools thin out the layers of pastels that I've done, so I don't worry about getting my layers too thick and filling in the tooth of the paper too quickly. Then I'm going to take some of that residual dark pastel dust that was on my blending tool, and I'm going to pull it in from this top section that needed to darken up a bit. I'm going to just do circular motions to help this become a nice soft blend. And again, it doesn't have to be blended perfectly right now. It's just an early layer. Okay. Let's see. Now I'm going to grab some greens and start blocking in kind of that blurred out green section that's right behind the top of our ornament. And there's a little bit of green that comes in at the corner. And I'm going to keep this really blurry so it looks like it's further away from where our ornament is. Not only changing color and value can help give depth into your picture, but also changing how much detail an object has. So the more blurry it is, the more it will receive visually. And it will help the focus of our picture. So in this case, this ornament is going to help it stand out, kind of pop. I'm also going to start blocking in some of these colors in the middle. So if you've noticed, some of these circles in the reference photo kind of have like a ring of a darker version of the color it is. So like a dark red around it, and then it gets paler in the middle. So I'm going to take dark red and do a few rings like that. I didn't do all of the little circles. I'm going to switch up the color. Let me use this one. Yeah, we'll use this one. I didn't draw all of the circles because that would be a bit redundant and it would be hard to work around, especially on a smaller picture like this one. I'm going to add a few over here. In our reference photo, it's almost like a star shape. I'm not going to stick with that, probably because I'm lazy. And I'm going to add just a little bit of a highlight in the center of some of these. I'm just using kind of a neutrally orange tone. Then I'm going to take a vibrant orange and do some rings with that. You can even have some overlap. sharpened. One of the things I love about working on sanded paper is how well you sharpen your pencils doesn't matter quite as much as if you were working with traditional pencils on a normal drawing paper. Add a little bit more to that one. Let's see, this one's a little bit darker. So we're just going to layer up some of the texture of this one. And remember, every picture goes through an ugly stage where you wonder why you're doing what you're doing. And right now this picture's starting to look like that. Okay. I'm going to add some of our oranges also around where some of these green branches are, just to indicate a little bit of a highlight. Also going to use some of our pale yellow color. And then come back in with our green. This is where it's helpful to look at your reference photos so you can really get an idea of the shape and the amount of detail and the value of what you're supposed to be drawing. Let's see. Now just a little bit more of our red color. Let's see. Seems like a sienna color. Just so I can get a little bit more opacity. I don't want the paper to be shining through too much on this. And let's see. Pull in some violet right along there. Okay, so I've got that blocked in a little bit more. I'm going to use this kind of dark ochre, more of a neutral yellow, just to add some shadow to this area. And I'm overlapping these circles to start with. Okay. I'm also going to add it to one side of the clip that holds our ornament on. Then I'm going to start blending things out yet again. And I'm going to be very, very light with how much I push down on this because I don't want to lift up too much of that background pigment. I just want to soften up those edges just a little bit. Okay, so I've blocked in some of that. Now I'm going to soften out some of these circles. I'm just switching my blending tool around so it doesn't pick up quite as much of the background colors that we've used. We'll still pick up a bit of them, but not quite as much. Okay, we want to get those nice soft effects on this, soft gradients. Okay, so we've got the background blocked in, and then we're going to start working on our ornament a little bit more. So that's the main focus. I'm going to see, whoops, zooming in just a little bit can help you see more of what I'm creating on this ornament. I'm going to start by blocking in the upper wire. And now that we're starting to get into more of this detailed area, I will be sharpening my pencils more frequently. I was hoping to sharpen my pencils before the stream started, but life, it happens. Let's see. And kind of picking out the colors I'm planning on using for it. Let's find some of our browns. That one will be good. Okay. So now I'm going to start on this upper part of the wire. And I'm just going to be looking at the shapes of the colors I see and block those in. So there's a big highlight on the back section right here and where it curves right on this side. We also have some peachy colors on it. It looks almost coppery. So we're just blocking in some of that. And we'll tweak this some more as we go along. Then we're going to do the ring that it loops around. Drop my pencil sharpener. Come in with a little bit of a neutrally yellow color. Start looking at the shapes of the highlights on that. And we can refine shapes and things as we go along. Let's see. Start blocking in where the white highlight is. There's going to be one on this side. Okay. Let's see. I'll use a kind of a creamy white to help with that. And then a little bit of our golden kind of yellow color. Okay. Then I'm going to block in some of the shadow part on the top. And I'm going to really largely be focusing on shapes. I've got kind of a rusty color. Because with the gold, you don't want to use like a straight yellow. That it won't read golden. And you want it to reflect some of those colors that are around it. I'm going to just start blocking in some of those shapes. And do some of those line details, the embossed details that you see on this little cap, or whatever it's called. Start applying some of those shadows. And I've got a little bit of burnt umber for a few of them. I'm going to also redefine the bottom of the shape. Then I'm going to come in and do some of the white detailing. Or you can actually use a pale yellow for it. That way we get a little bit of value variation between our bright highlights. And I'm not trying to copy the pattern exactly. I'm just trying to imply some of it. And I want it to be highlighted on kind of both sides of it because we're going to have a light source coming in from the left and from the right. Just kind of dull this one down a little bit. Okay. Now I'm going to use a little bit of white so that I can start preserving some of these brightest highlights. Because pastels are opaque. But if I want something to say super bright white, and I don't want to have to pull out my very opaque soft pastels to use with this, I find it a little bit easier just to block in a little bit of white to help preserve. Okay, then I'm going to take my most vibrant colors and use those around these highlights. That's where the brightest reflections are. So I'm going to start off with this like magenta-y pink color. And then kind of our bright orangey red. I'm looking at my reference photo for the basic shapes. And I'm not following the details on the inside of this ornament exactly. I'm just loosely building up those shapes. Okay. And how dull my pencil is might bother you if you are used to working with colored pencils. Let's see. This is also a very bright red color. This one's a Gioconda pencil. It's probably one of my favorite red pastels that I have, or of my pastel pencils. And all I'm doing is making sure that the lines that I'm drawing, even if they're not following the reference photo exactly, are curving in a way that fits the shape of our ornament. Okay. Now I'm going to start blocking in some of those shadows. Let's see. This one's a little bit lighter than the other one because not all of our shadows are the same value. And by deepening up the value, the colors around it, it's going to allow those really bright colors that we added earlier to really pop. And by dulling out the shadow colors we're adding aren't as vibrant either. So they're a darker value, but they're also less vibrant. I'm going to add a few orange spots. Okay. So I've got random shapes blocked in. It looks a little crazy right now, but I don't have my darkest darks in it yet. I'm going to take a rounded ended blending tool and I'm going to just gently blend this out. Okay. We're just filling this in, blocking in those shapes. As I do detail later on this, I am going to use my rubber shapers instead of my soft tool because that will preserve more of the fine details. The soft tool kind of blends them out so softly that you lose a lot of the detail work you add. So I find that this is a better tool for the earlier stages of blending. Okay. So I'm going to knock off the dust, and then we'll get started on the next stage. Okay. Now that everything's blocked in, I'm going to jump back and start working on this background and start refining it a little bit more. So I'm going to start on some of these softer branches that are in the background. And I'm going to really look at the shapes of what they look like in my reference photo. And again, another reminder, if you want to see the reference photo close up and you want to see the drawing guide I created to help you if you want to follow this tutorial, they are over on my YouTube channel, or this is my YouTube channel. They are over on my Instagram page and on my Facebook page, and those are linked in the description box below. And I'm using a mixture of greens for this, some more cool blue greens, some more yellowy base greens that are a little bit more vibrant, more warm toned. And I'm also looking to see where some of those highlights hit. I'm going to have some green foliage come out through where some of these little highlight lines are, or the little circles are. And I've got a really vibrant, like a spring green color, and I'm going to mix that with some of our orange, so that it stays like a brighter green, but it doesn't get, I want it to still have some of that yellowy, like that orangey yellow undertones. Now I'm taking my rubber shaper, and I'm using that to start to blend out these shapes. You can see it doesn't get rid of or overblend as easily as the soft tools. And the direction you blend can make a big difference on the end result. I'm going to add a pale yellow. And on a lot of this, it just helps to look at what the abstract shape is, not try to figure out what the object is. Because this is all blurred out. We just want to have a basic idea of what the shape will be. Okay. Now I'm going to start doing the same over on this branch. I'm going to look at where the darkest shadows are, and I'm going to take my dark greens and start blocking those in. And your little pine needles don't have to look exactly like the ones in the reference photo. Just use it as a guide to help you get your basic shapes in. I'm going to grab a brown and start blocking in where the branch is. And let's see. I'm going to get our lighter orangey brown color. Use that with it. This is just another soft tool, just a different shape. I'm going to start blocking in some more of the pine needles with a lighter green color. And I'm going to focus this lighter green color towards the front of this branch. I've got a cool green. Let's see. I'll use a different orange for now. I'm just layering in a little bit of orange to help fill in some of those gaps. I'm going to do the same with the red, the reddish brown colors we have. And with each layer we do, we'll become more and more refined and more detailed. Okay, so this is a little bit more detailed than the watercolor layer and the first layer of pastels, and then we'll work on some of those things around it, and then we'll do more layers. Again, just knocking off the dust because I don't want to blow the dust all over my art desk and in my face. Okay, this orange section is really dark, and it's a lot darker than the reference photo, but this was kind of our base to work from. Now I'm going to start taking some of our kind of peachy tones and start layering up different values that go with it. And I'm not going to make it fill in all of the circles. Okay. I'm going to do a little bit of our pale yellow. Let's see. I'm going to do a few with our dark orange. And I'm going to look at some of the abstract shadowy shapes within this, because not all of it is super bright. If your rubber shaper is a little bit dirty, it might transfer that color onto the next thing you're blending, so just make sure you wipe it off. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of red around. Let's see, that's a little too pink. I'm going to add just a little bit of our red to the area around this kind of glowing section. So I have some vibrant red. We've got some dustier red tones. Because now I'm going to use this to help blend this in. Use the red sponge we used earlier. And I'm going to do kind of painterly strokes with it to help it blend in. Okay. Let's see. Hopefully I have time to finish this picture before I have to go pick up my kids from school, but we'll see how far we can take it today. I'm going to take a bright white, almost white, it's the cream colored one, and then I'm going to start using that to fill in more of the highlighted sections. And if I don't want it to be quite as bright as something else, I won't do quite as thick of a layer. And I'm going to do some peachy tones. And I'm going to make sure the more vibrant colors are on the outside of these little circles. And then they get a little bit lighter as they go to the center. I'm just adding a few more of these little swirls and circles to our picture. Let's see. Do a brighter yellow around some of them. And this one I'm leaving not as opaque as some of the other ones. And then I'm going to take my blending tool. Let's see. Where did I set it? Well, I like my flat one, but I don't know where it went. So I'm going to use this more pointed one, and that's all right. I'm just going to hold it on its side to blend. And you can even take some of the dust that carries over onto your blending tool and do really pale, like hints of more of these circles in the distance. And then we're going to do, let's see, I'm going to take my black pastel and start reinforcing the dark values on this background. I'm going to go around some of these little lights that we've blocked in. By adding that contrast, it's really allowing our ornaments and those little highlights to pop. Add a little bit to this side. Not as much. I want most of the darkness to be coming from this bottom right side of our picture. Then I'm going to take our bright blue and I'm going to layer that up with the black. Just so it doesn't read too flat. I love using blues to help build up shadows. That one's a little too bright. Let's see. I need, let's see what color we have. There we go. And we've got our indigo, which is kind of a gray, blue, black color. We'll layer that up over the top. We'll take some of our violet. And I'll layer in a little bit of our green as well into this section. And then I'm going to start blending it in. And I'm just going to do a little bit more of a painterly effect on this and have it kind of swirl around. And then take some of that extra of this dark color that's on my blending tool and kind of pull it in from the top. I'm going to pull in some of this green from the branches. Then I'm going to take some of our reds. I go in this middle section. And reinforce some of those circles that we did. And blend it in. I'm blending it with the rubber shaper so it doesn't overblend. I'm going to do a little bit of that blue and a little bit of that black right here in this top corner to help blend this in and to tie these dark colors that were used over there on the other side of the picture. So it feels a little bit more balanced. Again, you're going to go through ugly stages on your picture where you're like, I don't know if that was the right choice. And that's okay. Because I'm feeling that way right now. Let's see. I'm going to add some more of our greens to this upper branch. Again, just layering different greens with it. And adding our browns. And then I'm going to redefine some of these ones on the other side. And I'm going to do a little bit of green right around our ornament. And then bring back some of those highlights. Some of them I'm going to have be a little bit more orange toned. Some of them are more like of a pinky red color. And some of them are more yellow. Just softening up some areas on this background a little bit more. And I can take in my blending tool and just lightly swirling these around. Okay, now I'm going to come back and start working on our ornament for the last few minutes. I'm going to take our bright highlight, which is this Derwent white, and it's one of the most opaque white pastel pencils I have. I'm really brightening up that side. Really looking at my reference photo and seeing kind of how wide highlights are and where they're located. I am going to tweak it just a little bit and kind of elongate this left highlight so it's not quite as much of a perfect circle, and do the same thing on the right hand side. Now I'm going to take my dark royal blue pencil and start blocking in more of those dark shadows. And by using this dark blue to start building up these darker values, it's pulling it into the reflection, which is going to help these blue colors and the black look like they belong in the picture. I'm not copying the shadows exactly, just trying to get a rough shape. And I'm just making sure they curve to match the shape of our ornaments. Our indigo. I'm also going to do some dark green because there's green branches around the tree. So some of those are going to be reflected in our ornament too. Now I'm going to blend them out just a little bit and soften them up. And we're going to add some orange to create some more highlights and color variation within this red ornament. I'm going to take some violet and add that. Let's see. Now I'm just picking out some red tones that I want to use for this as well. Whoops, that's not. Just a sec, let me use my electric sharpener. Now I'm going to kind of swirl in some different variations of red. So I've got this kind of dark magenta color. And a bright, vibrant red. And our, let's see. I'm going to reinforce some of these shadow sections. And then we're going to blend them out just a little bit. I think what's tricky about doing reflective objects is all the little details within it. And it can be really tricky trying to teach. Because there's no clear indicator on where you're working or what kind of shape you're creating, because it's all abstract. Let's see. Okay. The Stabilo pencils have some of my favorite reds in them. So we're going to pull that out. Start getting some of these red reflections. And the Stabilo pencils are some of the softest, so they're really nice for the end of a picture when you are trying to get those final details in. Now I'm pulling in a little bit of yellow in a few spots to help indicate a highlight. I'm going to use a little bit of a pale yellow. This is another Stabilo pencil or Carbothello, just to add a little bit of variation within those main white highlights. And then do a nice white section on it in the center. I'm going to do a little bit right up top. Since there's so much light hitting right here on the ornament, I want to have a little bit of a stronger highlight next to it. And I'm going to do a few little highlights on this darker section of the clamp to help indicate that it is embossed and it's textured. And then do a few little highlights on the bottom. And I'm just pushing really softly with this white so that it doesn't become too vibrant. And I'm going to switch it out for some yellow. And I'm going to take some dark purple. And just do a few more of those transitional shadows. And then very sparingly, I'm going to add just a few dark reflections on this ornament. I don't want a ton. I don't want to overpower what we've done, but just a few really dark ones. Let's see. Indigo will work good for this as well. And then I'm going to take, let's see, our burgundy and just soften it out just a touch. And I'm going to knock off the dust. And then I'm going to look at my picture and see what final tweaks need to be done. Okay. My pencils. And this is where I can really notice when companies take the time to color match their color on the end of their pencil with what the other color is. And this is where I get really frustrated when it doesn't match, because some of these I have are lighter or darker than what it indicates. So it can make it tricky to find the right pencil. For what I want it to be. Let's see, seal. Burnt umber will be great. Okay. There's that. And then let's do those last details on this background. Let's do some highlights on this branch in the center. Let's see, where's the green I want? Sometimes I feel like half of what I do is just sit and try to find the right color I want for a picture. We'll do a little bit of this kind of spring green color. And then we'll mix it with a little bit of our yellow right on the edges. And that is my alarm letting me know I've got to get my kids in just a few minutes. So we're going to finish up this picture and we'll call it a day. I know this tutorial can be a little complex and it can be a little hard for me to describe what I'm doing, but at the very least, I want this to give you a good idea of what it takes to start making a picture look a little bit more realistic. Because all making something look more detailed or more realistic is just lots of layers, going back and forth, tweaking and adjusting as you go along. Let's see. And just adding a last few of our bright orange highlights to this ornament. And then the other thing I'm going to just tweak is just make sure it looks round. And not too lopsided. Okay. I'm going to do a few dark pieces of the branches up here. Let's see. And a little bit of a highlight on some of the edges of these little pine needles. So it looks like there's some backlighting going on. And then have it dark in the center. And then just adding a little bit more color. It was a little bit transparent up in this section. And then some darks. Coming in from over here. Just layering it with some red, and so it will blend in a little bit better. I'm going to take my blending tool and just soften up those edges. I'm going to kind of follow the curves of these little boku circles or bokeh. I forgot what they're called. And I'm going to knock off the dust. And decide if I like it. And I think I'm liking how this is turning out. There were some moments where I began to panic. I was a little worried. Doesn't matter how many times I practice something, when I start teaching it live or on a live stream like this or in person, if I have to start like talking and painting, sometimes it can be hard for me to like know what the next step is. Or the picture will turn out worse than my practice ones because I was talking while painting. But I think I got it good. Just had to keep at it and practicing. Because the one thing I've learned more than anything else is that the more you practice, even if you have a picture that doesn't turn out the way you like it, it can be a learning opportunity and it's going to help you on your next picture. Let's see. Okay. Let's see if there's any more questions or anything to answer. So I have some tutorials on using traditional soft pastel blocks, not just pastel pencils. The last tutorial I did with a Christmas wreath, that one was a block picture. And let's see. It's good to see you. MJ Pete. I am just going to sign off because it's time to get my kids, but I hope you guys are having a great day, and I hope you guys enjoy the stream, and I will see you guys next time. Bye. Oh.